profoundly troubling going on, and frankly, I'm tired of being told otherwise. I'm tired of being told that things have always been this way, that nothing's really changed, that it's just a new form of something that's always been, or perhaps even the way that things are meant to be. The uncertainty, damage, and chaos that's brewing as we witness in real time. The wholesale death of trust and reason is already a tragedy enough, but it gets worse when you begin to realize that truth isn't the only victim. There's collateral damage of an even more tragic nature. This isn't just about humanity's struggle to maintain its grip on reality, it's about something far more fundamental, far more existential, something that I believe threatens the very essence of who we are. We're losing what makes us uniquely human, our identity, our self-awareness, our compassion, and our capacity for empathy. And I worry it might already be too late. This is the dead humanity theory.
Predicting what's to come is hard, but when we think about the future, I think it's probably worth looking at the present for
It's a great idea
to surf the net, just to see what's out there.
Okay.
One of the recurring themes throughout this video is the idea that it all too often feels like it's impossible to get any kind of remotely accurate sense of what's going on in the world around us. What's the actual state of things? Who's telling me the truth, who's intentionally lying, and who's merely parroting the same propaganda they might have been duped by? When you open up Twitter or Facebook and start scrolling through your newsfeed, it's really easy to forget that what you're seeing is not an unbiased, unfiltered, or untainted view of the world. In fact, it may very well be the opposite. Now, for those of us who care about the truth more than anything, navigating today's media landscape can feel almost impossible, which is why I wanted to partner with Ground News for this video. Ground News is a website and app that not only aggregates thousands of news outlets conveniently all in one place, but it also has a bunch of really cool features that provide the ever-important context we need to properly understand it all. They don't just show you what's being reported, it shows you who's reporting it, who isn't, and how differently the same story can be framed. Sometimes what's actually more interesting to me than what any media outlet is reporting on any given story is why other media outlets might want to avoid reporting on it entirely, which is why my favorite Ground News feature is the blind spot feed. I opened it up the other day to see that right-leaning media sources were curiously silent about the sentencing of an ex-Honduran congressman. But why? Trying to answer this question took me down a fascinating rabbit hole where I learned about the bipartisan backlash Trump was receiving related to his recent bizarre pardon of a former president of Honduras, who was sentenced to 45 years in prison for serious drug trafficking charges. There's so much we can learn about the divisive and often confusing state of affairs we find ourselves in when we see that right-leaning audiences are reading headlines like, "Freed Honduran ex-president says Trump pardon changed my life," while left-leaning folks are seeing the glaring hypocrisy behind Trump's war on drugs. Ground News makes comparisons like this super easy, but they take it so much further than that by providing us with tools like the blind spot feed and the bias and factuality ratings that help us take a step back to see the bigger picture, to put into perspective all of the different ways the media is actively trying to shape the way that we all see the world, which also gives us a much better understanding of how and why other people, especially those on the other side of the political divide, are seeing things so differently from us. Get a more objective view of the world and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent by heading to groundnews.com/veritas or scan the QR code on screen for 40% off the Vantage plan. Links in the description and pinned comment. The internet, the modern town square.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter. You might want to take a look.
Can you hear me, Judge? I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
The technological embodiment of the backbone of liberal democracy.
You can't just speak anytime you want.
I'm the chair of this committee.
That's not how it works.
Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized.
Madam Chairwoman, that is not how
Ms. Stansbury, you're not recognized.
All day, but that's not how
Ms. Stansbury, you're not.
The free marketplace of ideas. The notion that when ideas are allowed to compete openly without censorship or suppression, the truth will emerge.
If you take a Lorentzian metric as a section of a bundle of
pointwise Lorentz metrics and pull back the positive Weyl spinners with suitable passing to maximal compact subgroup, you get one generation of Petit Salam grand unified fermions.
I was in Chicago recently, and when I was walking by the Chicago Tribune building, I noticed a quote carved into its facade that seemed rather fitting.
Give me liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to my conscience, above all other liberties.
That's a quote from the 1644 work Areopagitica, John Milton's passionate critique of censorship and defense of free speech. He discusses the idea of truth and its ability to overcome the juxtaposition with misinformation.
Let her and falsehood grapple. Whoever knew truth put to the worse in a free and open encounter.
You think I am shocked by it, so I'm up here bashing it because I don't like gay people? I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
In On Liberty, the 1859 work by the English philosopher John Stuart Mills, he discusses the potential costs of governmental censorship.
The peculiar evil of silencing the expression of an opinion is that it is robbing the human race. If the opinion is right, they are deprived of the opportunity of exchanging error for truth. If wrong, they lose what is almost as great a benefit, the clearer perception and livelier impression of truth, produced by its collision with error.
I'm talking about
every private and public sector gets tax cuts when you hire a person of color.
Government agencies don't pay taxes. Government agencies operate are funded by the government.
That is not true. That is not true. And you know what? I think
in a 1984 article published in the Duke Law Journal entitled The Marketplace of Ideas, A Legitimizing Myth, Stanley Ingber writes about the Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Justice Holmes first introduced the concept into American jurisprudence in his 1919 dissent to Abrams v. United States. The best test of truth is the power of thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market. This theory assumes that a process of robust debate, if uninhibited by governmental interference, will lead to the discovery of truth, or at least the best perspectives or solutions for societal problems.
How is it sustainable if you're killing trees?
Because it's regenerative, you can grow trees.
Right. Well, you can grow all sorts of things, can't you?
Well, you can't grow concrete.
You can.
Ingber finishes by saying,
a properly functioning marketplace of ideas, in Holmes' perspective, ultimately assures the proper evolution of society, wherever that evolution might lead.
As a linguist, translator, and cryptologic.
Now, Ingber's use of the word evolution here does quite a bit of heavy lifting, as there are countless parallels that can be drawn not only between the competition of markets and ideas, but also with life itself. In On the Origin of Species, Charles Darwin's description of the process by which the diversity of life arises is almost indistinguishable from many descriptions of the idealization of a free market economy. Adam Smith's invisible hand at work in the natural world.
It may be said that natural selection is daily and hourly scrutinizing, throughout the world, every variation, even the slightest, rejecting that which is bad, preserving and adding up all that is good, silently and insensibly working, whenever and wherever opportunity offers, at the improvement of each organic being.
Now, whether we're talking about genetics, the quality of goods and services, or the truth, all of these ideas echo a common theme. The best outcomes will inevitably emerge from pure, unhindered competition. The obvious question we have to ask is any of this actually true? Now, the reason why I enjoy talking about this particular metaphor, the comparison between the free exchange of goods and the free exchange of ideas, is the intersection between what each idea predicts in principle compared to what we actually observe in reality. What's so fascinating, to me at least, is not how similar the two systems are in the abstract, but rather how identically wrong they both are in the assumptions that they make about the people operating within them. The free marketplace of ideas relies on the assumption that participants are informed, rational actors that have the willingness and ability to critically evaluate arguments and evidence. It assumes that each person values truth above everything else. It requires that everyone has access to the same information and that ideas compete in a free, open, and transparent exchange where misinformation is debunked and discarded and the truth ultimately rises to the top.
So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater, right? Which, let's say all of that happens. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
Now, free market economics relies on a strikingly similar set of assumptions. That consumers are fully informed about all of the options available to them, that they're capable of objectively evaluating which is best, and ultimately that consumers acting in their own self-interest ultimately reward and thus promote business practices that are good, punishing those that are bad.
The one thing that you're always kind of in the news one way or another on Goop, and the one thing that I just saw was a big thing was that you had a candle.
Oh, yeah.
And the name of the candle, it was sold out. What is it called again?
It's called This Smells Like My Vagina.
No need to add notes or anything. That's the name of the candle. And
Yes.
it's sold out like crazy.
Now, in reality, both systems fail to live up to those idealizations because of the countless flaws in human psychology and the inevitability of corporations taking advantage of those flaws. People are misinformed about the basic facts, overwhelmed by what's effectively an infinite amount of information that they neither have the time, willingness, nor ability to process, and are driven much more by emotion than reason. We want what's most convenient and what makes us the least uncomfortable, preferring whatever aligns with our identity and coincides with our worldview, rather than what's objectively true or valuable. And as such, corporations are incentivized to present us with what we want rather than what we need. Every possible option in the world algorithmically filtered down to the dozen or so options that we're most likely to consume. Truth and quality take a backseat to profit and adaptability to an algorithm, leading to a world where the most popular products are overpriced, low-quality slop that we can't get enough of. And the most popular ideas are a conglomeration of lies, misinformation, and half-truths. A world dominated by McDonald's and Twitter.
The ice cream machine, totally broken, and everybody knows it. It's been broken a long time. Biden did that, not me. Sleepy Joe, more like Sloppy Joe, am I right?
Now let's be clear here. It's absolutely fair to say that social media is the contemporary town square. But the notion that platforms like Facebook and Twitter even have the remotest possibility of being the bastions of free, unhindered expression that many people imagine them to be is laughably stupid for a number of reasons. Firstly, the companies who run these platforms aren't who the First Amendment was created to protect us from. They aren't required to uphold some kind of strict adherence to the principle of the freedom of expression. It's the government that the Constitution protects us from. Now, secondly, when it comes to the law, whether we agree with it or not, or think it's ultimately a good thing or not, is irrelevant. These platforms are perfectly within their rights to moderate their content how they please. We, the voluntary users, explicitly agree to their terms of service and are at the whim of their content guidelines. Limiting the types of speech they want to allow and disallow on their platform isn't a violation of your rights. And neither is banning you outright for speech that they determine to be dangerous, harmful, or unwelcome.
When major advertisers conspired to pull their dollary dues, even brands like Dunkin' Donuts turned their back, claiming Rumble had a right-wing culture. But we're not here to fit a mold. We're here to defend free expression. Free speech is under attack, Jack, but Rumble refuses to take it lying down.
If I have to hear one more person crying that free speech is dead because YouTube banned them for doing or saying some dumb shit, while those same types of people celebrate students being rounded up by the government for doing nothing more than publicly expressing their political opinions, I'm gonna fucking puke.
So this is a country where if you're from another country and you're in America, don't say anything about our politics or you could be forcibly removed from the country. You're comfortable with America being that kind of country.
Yeah, I'd say marginally.
I'm a free speech guy, right? I think that something that's nice about America is that we're a country that has that value, and that we don't generally think that you should be tossed into a van and kicked out of the country for expressing an opinion. I think that that's bad. I think it makes the country smaller. I think it makes the country worse. I think it's a violation of most of the values that I grew up with as an American, and that's my view of what's happening in the country. Now, if you want to say, hey, I don't like free speech for foreign nationals who are in the country who express mild opinions about other countries' foreign wars, then that's your prerogative. It's a big difference between us that you don't like free speech in that way.
I mean, that's loaded language, right?
Yeah, all the language you're using is pretty loaded.
Well, you keep using adjectives to describe things to diminish one thing while exacerbate or exaggerate something else.
I do use the English language to express my thoughts and opinions. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's straw manning. It's not a legitimate attack of the ideas, right? So accosted on the street. Come on. She was arrested. Okay. She was arrested by a relatively large group of men compared to what a normal arrest would require, which I think they didn't need to do and was silly. So we can say she was arrested by several men, unmarked, or plain clothes, which didn't need to happen. But I don't need to say like she was accosted by men on the street and like it was about a mild opinion. It's like, okay, listen, the facts of the case, like I said, I don't like the idea that people come to this country and then try and tell us how to live our lives.
You're not for free speech. I understand.
And also, as a side note, it's kind of bonkers to me that Russell Brand thinks that listing off these guys as his colleagues on Rumble, especially during an ad read during the episode featuring Terrence Howard as a guest, is like some kind of selling point for the platform.
Content from creators like Russell Brand, Yo, I'm that dude, Dr. Disrespect, Tim Cast, and the Muck Club with Crowder. It's more than a subscription, it's a stand for free speech.
All of these dudes do have something quite significant in common, but it's got nothing to do with free speech. But I digress. There's this concept in biology known as convergent evolution, when entirely different species at different points in time develop seemingly identical traits, completely independent of the others, simply because they face the same kinds of environmental competitive pressures. The development of the eye is my favorite example. Obviously, we have eyes, but if you follow our ancestral lineage back over like 500 million years, you'd come across one of our distant ancestors, this gross little bastard that at the time hadn't yet developed eyes. Now, at various points throughout the evolutionary history of this species, their evolutionary tree branched off down a number of entirely different paths, one eventually leading to our more direct ancestors, one eventually leading to the octopus, and another, interestingly enough, leading to the scallop, each of whom independently developed their own unique, yet strikingly similar, versions of the eye. Now, when we look at the fragmented ecosystem of modern social media, we've witnessed a different kind of convergent evolution, one that's less biology and more sociology, technology, economics, and politics. It's an evolution of behavior and of strategy. Despite creators attempting to adapt to each platform's unique conglomeration of content algorithms, with each platform a seemingly distinct and unique competitive environment trying to set themselves apart from the others, they've all inevitably given rise to an uncannily similar collection of features and behaviors, the digital equivalent of the evolution of the eye. Now, just like in nature, the key to survival is vision. Except in the case of social media, it's not about seeing, it's about being seen.
We used to colonize land. That was the thing you could expand into, and that's where money was to be made. We colonized the entire earth. There was no other place for the businesses and capitalism to expand into, and then they realized human attention, that they are now trying to colonize every minute of your life. That is what these people are trying to do. Every single free moment you have is a moment you could be looking at your phone and they could be gathering information to target ads at you. That's what's happening. So like, as much as we can, have really good conversations and try to humanize the conversations, the mechanism of the business is rolling towards that just because of the markets. So it's coming. It's coming for every free second you have.
Any of my fellow millennials out there? Who remembers the classics, the good old days? Miniclip.com, addictinggames.com, Newgrounds? I mean, come on, you weren't a true American in 2002 if you didn't want to punch out Osama in everyone's favorite Flash game, War on Terrorism. Remember the OG E-Bombs world? The only place to get a movie review for The Matrix Reloaded, beat level 5 in this volleyball game and you get to play topless, and watch Monkey sticks finger in rear end and passes out. Which Friends character are you? Take this quiz to find out. Now, personally, I've always thought of myself as a Monica, but I've been told I'm more of a Ross. Not sure I really see it. 12 things you remember if you went to school in the 90s. Remember those parachute things? Those were fucking awesome. Holy shit, the Magic School Bus, Bill Nye, You always knew it was going to be a good day when the first thing the teacher did was roll the TV cart into class. Well, except that one time. Remember Kazaa, Homestar Runner, AIM, fucking Snood? Who remembers Snood? I'd get home from school smelling like Axe body spray, kick off my K-Swisses, and sit down at the computer and just vibe.
You cannot quit me so quickly.
Yo, did you see this month's Game Informer? GTA Vice City's finally out. Bitch, you better ask Mom to take you down to Blockbuster before there's no more copies left to rent.
You some kind of tough guy? You dress like a woman? You got on panties like a woman too, huh? Something like this.
Yo, I know our entire generation has undiagnosed ADHD, but we really gotta focus. I never thought I'd look back so fondly on the days before social networks became so antisocial. When, like, all of your friends were actually your friends. Back when Facebook required a college email address. Every couple of months or so, I open Facebook now because that's the best place I can talk to my dad. And when my home feed loads, the first thing I see is a meme that my grandmother posted tucked in between an ad for male enhancement pills and reels for OnlyFans models. Now, back in the day, social media wasn't about follows or views. You wanted to see what the people you literally knew in real life were up to, and to the extent that social media had content, it was the stuff that you and your friends shared between each other that you found organically. Content wasn't created specifically for social media. It wasn't designed from the ground up with half a dozen platforms in mind. It was curated across a million other websites that converted traffic into ad revenue. Now, things sure did suck a whole lot less than they do now, but even then, many of us could see the writing on the wall.
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology, in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along.
As culture changes, technology improves, and these platforms evolve, so too does the meta. Sensationalist news headlines have been a thing since the invention of the printing press, and while the relatively new medium that was the early internet was never truly going to reinvent the wheel, it was the next logical evolution of the same principle. The birth of the modern clickbait culture was unavoidable, exploiting the basic psychology of human curiosity and our proclivity for the inspirational, the nostalgic, the hilarious, heartwarming, and heart-wrenching, combined with the dopaminergic cycle of anticipation and reward, wasn't at all unexpected. But the dopamine hits differently when it not only comes from what is effectively an endless supply instantaneously, but when it's also interactive in a way that it never was before. The war over the control of our limbic systems had taken a major turn.
People thought like headlines were the death of newspaper and the death of news coverage because we would reduce shit to a headline in no articles. Now it's just all that. It's like, and like they're memeing, like the politicians are memeing, which makes me want to fucking put a bullet in my head, like truly, when they're like walking into parliament like, and then like a gif from like RuPaul's Drag Race, like fucking shoot me in the head. Sorry.
Now back in the day when web traffic was king, pure uncut clickbait was the primary meta. And of course that never really went away. But it wouldn't take long for these platforms to realize that the relationship between them, their user base, and the content that was being shared to their platforms was, let's just say, economically suboptimal. And this is where things start to get a bit more dystopian and a whole lot more meta.
It only now just occurred to me that that was an accidental pun. I love that every time now that I use the word meta, I have to clarify that I'm not talking about Facebook.
Yo, my guy, come on, let's focus. If you're a social media website with millions of users, but up until this point had no real way to monetize that user base, why would you want your users to be sharing content on your platform that serves only to redirect them to other websites that were monetizing them? That doesn't sound like savvy capitalism now, does it? When changes happen in an environment and opportunities present themselves, competitors need to adapt if they want to survive. And not only are these social media platforms vying for success within their increasingly saturated competitive environments, but the platforms themselves are their own self-contained environments within which people and content are actively competing. Talk about meta. No, not... After 20 years of war, cannibalism, and incest between the social media platforms and this bizarre, degenerate landscape is a state of affairs that you'd be forgiven for confusing with the plot of an episode of Black Mirror. It's not just that every other kid these days aspires to be a content creator, it's that every single one of us, whether we like it or not, already is one. And this is, of course, unavoidable if you actually think about it. After all, what we're talking about is a platform where the real content is actually you. Now imagine a place where the popularity of thoughts, ideas, and attitudes was based on how much money was spent to promote them, where the inherent value of an opinion was objectively measured based on its ability to elicit as large of an emotional response from as many people as possible. A place where cults of personality thrive and truth is decided by the analytics. A place that, by definition, attracts the most extreme people, and by design amplifies the most extreme views. Where you have the freedom to say just about anything you want, but unless you have a premium account, nobody will ever see it. A pay-to-win platform where you can see porn alongside presidents who paralyze peace talks, parrot lies about poll percentages, and participate in pissing matches over how many people were present at his parade compared to the opposing political parties' protests, all while praising Putin. Adam Smith imagined a benevolent force at the heart of the free market, guiding self-interest toward the collective benefit, one that doesn't impose outcomes or intervene. The literal translation of the French in laissez-faire economics is, let it happen. The modern digital marketplace of ideas is governed by its own twisted version of the invisible hand, silently steering collective attention toward whatever maximizes mass emotional response, independent of truth or consequence. The algorithm. So, according to my YouTube analytics, it turns out if you're watching this right now, it's extremely likely that you're a millennial male. And considering that my first 500 or so videos were FPS gaming content, I guess there's really no surprise there. But I will say I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that with my more recent long-form content, almost 8% of my viewership is now female, which is an increase of about 8%. Also, as it happens, statistically, it's far more likely than not that you, watching this right now, yes, you, Chris, are not currently subscribed to my channel. If you look around YouTube and see all the degenerate content creators with millions of subscribers making millions of dollars who make nothing but cringeworthy garbage, and you think that the kind of content I'm trying to make here has earned at the very least a single click of your mouse, please consider subscribing to the channel. Maybe turning on notifications and acknowledging that my saying those words out loud unironically makes me die a little on the inside, but what can I say? You've left me no choice. Now that I know that statistically I'm preaching to the choir, pretty much all of you will remember the before times. Before the algorithms took hold, before the platforms had a decade of collecting every single piece of information about every single one of us. Before they tracked where we lived, how much money we made, what products we were searching for, what movies and music we liked, or what our political affiliations were. Before companies like Target figured out that your high school-aged daughter was pregnant before she built up the courage to tell you, based solely on algorithms that found correlations between their recent purchases of cocoa butter and magnesium supplements with newborn clothes and baby formula. Imagine your confusion when you check the mail one day only to see coupons for cribs and maternity clothes addressed to your teenage daughter. Back in the day, when content went viral, it was something that happened to it. It wasn't the primary goal for which the content was created. There was no algorithm. YouTube wasn't seen as a system to be metagamed. We're talking about the pure, unadulterated art that was the early 2000s era of YouTube, before creators had to worry about demonetization because, well,
there was no monetization.
Got her number. The next day we went to chicken fillet, some place in the mall. When I got there, I was like, bitch, where all these people out here? She said, well, it's the mall. I was like, whatever, bitch, give me a chicken sandwich and some waffle fries.
Back when the discerning viewer had a respect for the avant-garde nature of the medium.
Come on, girl, when you add 5 plus 5. Come on, girl, 55, do that 55. Come on, girl, shake your butt, you ex. 55, 55, now let's do the stick, come on.
Before every crazy viral video was blatantly fake or staged.
Shit off, so it don't even matter. Oh, shit. Oh, Jesus, 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 Lord, Jesus, oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus Christ, oh, Jesus. Jesus, oh, Lord Jesus, oh, shit. Whoa, whoa. That was awesome right there, God damn. Oh, shit. Oh, Lord Jesus, oh, Jesus.
Back before everything became so contrived, and the content was relatable, a true reflection of the average struggles of everyday life.
The winner this Saturday who stomps the most juice will actually win an overnight stay here at Chateau Alon.
You ready?
You ready to try it?
Yeah, sure.
Let's go.
Not disgusting.
All
right, you ready? Give us a 30-second time. Here we go.
It's a lot of fun, a whole day. Stop.
Oh, no. Oh,
boy,
dear.
I think she's actually hurt.
No,
there.
I think she is.
Before memes were intentionally handcrafted and everything was performative and scripted. Back when the videos that truly deserved 100 million views got them.
Okay, my mom just canceled my brother's World of Warcraft account, and he is freaking out. She only once! Oh my god. Baby boy! Damn it, bro!
Now, there is admittedly still some debate amongst contemporary historians as to exactly what the cause was for the decline. But the overwhelming consensus is that this was the moment that the internet had hit its peak, and it was only downhill from here. YouTube's identity has gone through a number of fundamental shifts over the last 2 decades, separated into what I would say are 4 primary areas. We just saw a glimpse of the first, circa the early 2000s, where YouTube was simply a website where people could upload their videos. There really was no algorithm to speak of at this point. There was a single metric that ruled supreme: view count, and all it took to earn a view from someone was to get them to click on the video. So naturally, it wouldn't take long for folks to take advantage of this highly exploitable system. The YouTube clickbait meta was born. Whenever you have a fairly primitive system such as this, one where the performance of content in a competitive ecosystem is based on a singular metric whereby one or two basic strategies are overwhelmingly successful compared to the rest. It's only a matter of time before the min-maxers will find every way to abuse and exploit the weaknesses of that system to their advantage. Now, sometime in the early 2010s, after YouTube began to realize the effect that this meta was having on its content and user base, they began to realign their priorities. Recognizing the fundamental disconnect between a video's view count and viewer satisfaction, watch time became the new gold standard, and the era of the YouTube video rabbit hole was born. Most successful content was still tapping into the same kind of viewer curiosity as before, but creators were now actually being rewarded for actually delivering on the sensationalist titles and thumbnails, incentivized to do everything they could to keep the viewer's attention. The longer they watched, the more YouTube was willing to promote their video. Now, in the last decade or so, while we may have embraced higher quality, longer form content, when it comes to titles and thumbnails, we never actually evolved beyond the early 2010s mindset. Despite the content evolving, many creators still seem to be attempting to optimize their titles and thumbnails as if it were the old days of the clickbait meta. The vast majority of creators just have no idea what the hell works and what doesn't. And it's simply not worth gambling our paychecks on experiments or attempts to innovate, so we just copy the way it's always been. Because, well, it works, right? The end result of this is we're all operating in a space where the word clickbait still has the same original shameful stigma that it always had, and yet the word has evolved to the point that it means something distinctly different than it used to. It's the worst of both worlds. Clickbait is content that has a title, headline, or thumbnail that misrepresents the content itself, relying on dishonesty to effectively trick you into clicking. This is clickbait. It's not only transparent and shamelessly attempting to appeal to the crowd that's looking for a glorified snuff film, which 15-year-old me opening up facesofdeath.com for the first time would tell you that you're just better off not watching. But it also promises to wow us with something unexpected that would follow.
Oh my god, the guy died. And then what did he do?
Surprising absolutely nobody, it's just lying to you. It tricked you into clicking by giving you a specific expectation that it never even attempted to deliver on. This particular video is literally Fortnite footage mixed in between clips of different people who had some, mildly unfortunate experiences or close calls. Thankfully, at no point in the video was whatever was being shown in the thumbnail actually shown or discussed. It was a bait and switch. This is clickbait, the thing that was extremely effective in the earlier days of YouTube, the practice that earned itself such a bad reputation, and for good reason. Appealing to your curiosity by teasing something, withholding information, or using exaggerated or provocative language in order to try to entice you into clicking, absent any kind of explicit deception, is not clickbait. My most popular video discusses the alleged cheating controversy surrounding the infamous retro arcade video game personality, Billy Mitchell. Now, is what I talk about in the video really the biggest lie in the entirety of video game history? How would you even quantify such a thing? It's quite obviously and intentionally provocative and entirely subjective statement. But not only that, it's also kind of ambiguous, right? What exactly is the lie? If you don't know about the scandal, you might be curious as to what this massive lie is all about, and maybe you'll click. Is the lie that he cheated, or is the lie the accusation itself? Piquing your curiosity or even being generally vague isn't deceptive. It's not clickbait if it actually delivers on the implicit promise. That's just marketing. There's this extremely fascinating double standard out there that I've noticed where some people feel as if content creators should avoid doing anything at all to try to convince you to click on their videos. Every now and then I get a comment that says something along the lines of, well, this video is really great and all, but I wish I didn't have such a clickbait title. Bitch, you wouldn't have gotten a chance to enjoy the video if the title was whatever boring shit you imagine it should have been. If it was less enticing, less people would have clicked on it. It would have less views and probably would have never even shown up in your recommendations feed. And if it did, it may very well not have been as attention-grabbing enough for you to click on it. So if you enjoy the content, then shut the f***. Sometimes content is intentionally designed to subvert your expectations, and for whatever reason that can rub certain people the wrong way. Now, they're entirely entitled to whatever opinion it is that they feel. But let's not get it twisted. There's nothing inherently dishonest, deceptive, or clickbaity about that. Nobody's out here accusing M. Night Shyamalan of clickbait because the trailers for The Village made it seem like the movie was about a 19th century Amish community living in a forest full of big scary monsters, but spoiler alert, it turns out that the monster isn't real and the movie actually takes place inside a wildlife preserve in 2005. The people inside the village should be mad that their entire life was effectively clickbait, but you shouldn't be mad that there was a surprise ending. All of this is to say that if we want words like clickbait to mean anything at all, we really need to stop using them where they don't apply. Content isn't clickbait just because it's trying to get your attention. When that tasty worm is there to hide the metal hook that ends up through the side of your face, it makes sense that you'd be pissed about the false advertising. If I just wiggle a nice juicy worm in front of you and then just allow you to enjoy it and carry on with the rest of your fishy day, you shouldn't be mad that I convinced you to bite. You should be thankful for the free meal. Clickbait content says, I'm going to show you X, click me to see. And then at no point does it actually show you X. Normal, non-clickbait content says, you'll never believe X, click me to see. And then it shows you X and you go, huh, that was pretty interesting. Content that utilizes purposeful, strategic subversion says, I'm going to show you X, click me to see. And then when you click, it says, aha, surprise. You expected X, but it's actually something else entirely. And here's why that's so interesting. And then you go, damn, that really was interesting. You see the difference? I suppose I should probably clarify once again, given that this is a video about social media, that when I say X, I'm just using it as the generic sort of hypothetical example. I'm not referring to Twitter. Brother, I think they get it. Now, the late 2010s saw the beginnings of YouTube's third era, where they began to focus on tailoring its recommendations to each individual viewer, analyzing their viewing patterns, watch history, interests, and even the types of content they were most likely to engage with, providing each person with their own bespoke home feed, distinct from what we all saw previously, a fairly basic mashup of videos from the channels that you were subscribed to in chronological order. This was a period where YouTube began focusing not solely on watch time, but rather valued watch time, which is not only how effective your content was at getting people to click and then stick around to watch, but also how likely they were to come back and rewatch multiple times, to stick around on the platform and watch more content after, and how much engagement you were able to garner. Watch time indicates that you stayed, but these different forms of extra engagement indicate that you care, signaling the types of things that you value and the kinds of topics that you feel are important. This kind of interaction is a direct signal to the algorithm that these particular subjects mean something to you, and these kinds of inputs are exactly what were needed to bring us to where we are today, the age of AI. These days, YouTube's algorithm isn't based on one or two metrics. It's a sophisticated prediction engine powered by machine learning models trained on staggering amounts of behavioral data, neatly packaged into a gargantuan black box. All of your behavioral data is collected and used as an input into machine learning models that are trained to spit out a highly individualized answer to the most important question that YouTube can ask. What content is most likely to keep you on their platform for as long as possible? Now, while I'm fascinated about how revolutionarily powerful and useful these systems running on top of artificial neural networks are, the more I find myself asking a question that feels particularly, well, ominous. Are we the ones training these machine learning algorithms on our past behavior? Or could it also be that the real behavior that's being trained is our own?
60 years ago, the American psychologist B.F. Skinner investigated the behavior of pigeons, rewarding them with food when they learnt to peck a key in the feeding apparatus. But then Skinner set the apparatus to reward the birds at random. Now the pigeons just had to sit back and wait. But that isn't what they did. Instead, the majority developed what Skinner called superstitious behavior. When an individual pigeon, for example, happened to look over its left shoulder, and the reward mechanism just happened to click in at that point, it would have got the idea that it was looking over the left shoulder that had got it the reward. And so the pigeon was reinforced in its idea that looking over the left shoulder was what got it the reward.
Where does that leave free will? Because we all think we have a choice whether to do things or not to do things.
Yes. Well, you see, it leaves it in the position of a fiction. We have assumed somehow or other that these internal states, feelings, and so on, have initiated something. They have started something. They have created. We have done something in a voluntary way. We have willed to act. If you now look at the actual history, we find that there are external reasons why this has happened. In other words, by discovering the causes of behavior, we can dispose of the imagined internal cause. And once you have found those causes, there is less you need to attribute to an internal act or will, and eventually I think we need to attribute nothing to it.
Hey, Vsauce! Michael here. In 1631, a printing house in London released their latest version of the King James Bible that included, well, an interesting version of the Ten Commandments. To this day, there's still speculation about whether or not the mistaken printing of "Thou shalt commit adultery" was actually a mistake at all. Some suspect it might have been sabotage or even a twisted joke, while others speculate if it might have been a clever marketing strategy. This ambiguity is a big reason why the Wicked Bible as it's known today is, well, still known today. When we see mistakes, especially in places designed to capture our attention, how can we be sure if what we're looking at is actually human error or if perhaps it's something a bit more devious and deliberate? Just the other day, my podcast co-host, Jesse Kazam, spelled my name wrong in the title of one of our videos. Now, I immediately got a number of comments and messages across a number of different platforms. Many of them were under the impression that the misspelling was intentional, either as some kind of meta joke or as a cheeky engagement farming tactic. It wasn't, he just fat-fingered the spelling. But the interesting thing was that my immediate thought wasn't to go and fix it, it was to ask myself, should I? I mean, it already garnered a bunch of engagement, so like, why would I? Now, despite hearing from a number of content creator associates of mine that this is a common tactic that more successful creators have been doing for years, it's not really clear to me whether or not it's actually effective in any way. I had a few people mention this video to me. I built a extreme boat, concluding that this was a real successful example of that exact engagement farming strategy. Now, when I first looked at this video after only 14 hours, it had already gotten over 2 million views. And in the 2 months since it came out, it's gotten over 40 million views. So while I was initially skeptical of this strategy, who am I to question something like this? I've got what, like 0.1% of his subscriber count. What the fuck do I know? And that question is one that, by and large, every content creator has had to ask themselves more than once throughout their careers. What the fuck do any of us know about the platforms that we're creating content for? Lots of us think we understand the key aspects of each platform's algorithms, and you, the consumers, very often think that you do as well. But in reality, we're all just operating under countless assumptions that simply don't have any connection with reality. One such set of assumptions that nearly every creator makes is related to what makes great thumbnails and titles great. That is to say, what exactly is their purpose? The most commonly held idea is that the goal of titles and thumbnails is to pique the curiosity of as many viewers as possible, to get them craving the answers to some questions that they feel they just have to get answered by watching the video, making it almost impossible for them not to click. The reality is, in the modern iteration of the YouTube algorithm, the strategy of getting as many people as possible to click on your video, i.e. maximizing your video's click-through rate, is actually the worst possible strategy that will hurt your video's performance far more than it'll help. Now, what naturally stems from that are the related sets of assumptions that consumers have related to what they perceive are the primary motives and intentions behind the titles, thumbnails, and topics that are chosen by creators. So much of that is often just wrong as well. I had originally put together a fairly lengthy segment getting into the details of what actually makes great thumbnails great, something that I only recently discovered that has changed the way I view the performance of content all over YouTube, but it got just a bit too off topic, so I think that's for a future video. While at first glance, the 5 major social media platforms often appear largely indistinguishable from each other, and there's a fair amount of overlap when it comes to the content on each, upon closer inspection, it's fairly evident that they're quite distinct in many respects. And it's these environmental differences that shape which organisms end up at the top of each platform's food chain. After years of audiences diverging, monetization changes, algorithmic adjustments, we find that, by and large, these 5 platforms have developed their own unique identity and vibe. YouTube is all about long-form storytelling and topical deep dives. Instagram is all about polished aesthetics, highly curated visuals, and flexing lifestyles, all of which capitalize on our aspirations and our FOMO. Facebook is a kind of catch-all community hub, part social network, part community board, part memes, and part marketplace. Twitter is all about hot takes and real-time reactions to the 30-second news cycle. And TikTok is the slot machine of the internet, promoting short-term viral trends and rapid discovery in an attempt to lock you into an endless dopamine spin cycle.
Who the fuck put chicken nuggets in the fucking bathroom garbage can? When the fuck will you eat chicken nuggets in a fucking bathroom? What's wrong with you? What are you fucking shitting and eating at the same fuck?
This is straight up a steal. This is the latest upgraded mount. No, walk the fuck away and let those dumbass motherfuckers choke on their own bullshit.
I just took a shit in a human's tent while they were sleeping.
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's the fucking Wild West over there. Now, we don't know a ton of specifics about the algorithms fueling all of the other social media platforms, but we do know a little bit about Twitter, as their algorithm was open sourced back in 2023. Twitter's recommendation engine is a giant funnel composed of a handful of machine learning models, each trained on staggering amounts of user behavior and content. One of the final stages of that funnel is called the heavy ranker. And put as simply as possible, it takes a massive batch of pre-selected candidate tweets and runs them through a fairly simple process that gives them each a score. The highest scoring tweets in each batch are effectively what you're fed as you scroll. Now, the obvious question that you should be wondering at this point is, how are they scored? Knowing this would give us a really good insight into what the platform prioritizes when it comes to how users consume and interact with its content, and fortunately for us, that part is pretty simple. There's 10 possible actions that are considered for each tweet, with each given their own weighted multiplier such that the end result is each factor roughly contributes an equal amount to the overall score, which quantifies how likely you are to do any of the following when you view any given tweet. Like, retweet, reply, visit their profile, watch 50% of the attached video, view the conversation thread, have your own reply engaged by the author, block or mute the author, indicate that you're not interested in this post, or report it. Now, the sum of these 10 weighted factors determines the score of each candidate tweet. So in other words, Twitter wants to show you anything and everything that you're most likely to engage with. Now, you might be thinking, no shit. And at first glance, this will likely surprise nobody. But I found that this is one of those things that when you take a step back and really walk through the real-world practical implications of what they're doing, it exposes itself as the truly dystopian strategy that it really is. Imagine a spectrum of potential emotional responses that you'll have when you're presented with some idea or opinion, ranging from emotions like fear, anger, desperation, cynicism, something that makes you feel as though you're witnessing some terrible injustice that challenges your core principles or beliefs. And on the other end, you have the things that tap into your joy and optimism, the types of things that makes you burst out laughing or leave you feeling elated and inspired. If you were to try and quantify the likelihood that any given person will feel compelled to engage with any random piece of content based solely on how that content makes them feel, what do you suspect that graph might look like? Pretty much every piece of research that I've come across agrees with what my intuition and experience told me would likely be the case. While positive content on social media does increase engagement over more neutral content, negative content is vastly more effective at garnering engagement, especially when it comes to sharing that content. Now, when I personally come across something cute or funny that otherwise generates some kind of positive emotion, I'll almost always like it because I want to both indicate to the platform that I enjoy this sort of thing and also reward the creator in some small way for sharing content that makes the world a better place, even if at a microscopic scale. The like button is a kind of personal signal of support, a nod of appreciation, and as a creator, I try to follow the golden rule. I want people who enjoy my content to hit the like button. So even though by default my lazy ass doesn't feel like leaving full screen to click it, I try to make a conscious effort to do it as much as I can to avoid being a hypocrite. Now, when it comes to sharing content, that signals a different kind of thing entirely. Depending on the context, it can serve as a positive endorsement, a show of support, or in other cases as an example of something negative that I might feel compelled to make an example of. More often, though, it's a kind of stand-in for the real-life experience of seeing something and thinking, holy shit, come look at this.
Into right. And playable for Acuna to make the catch. Vivas is doubled up! Wow!
These days, I tend to reserve comments for things that are more personal in nature, like asking or answering questions, sharing lighthearted personal anecdotes, or posting poignant, high-quality memes and references that mostly make me giggle and probably no one else.
So, if an intruder breaks into a tiger cage and gets eaten by the tiger, how much should we punish the tiger?
Well, there is some precedent case law on this.
Now, other times I might want to provide what I feel like might be missing perspective or context in a particular conversation. Although if that conversation is something that I think is particularly important, I generally figure that if it's worth sharing to one or two people in someone else's comment section, it's probably worth sharing with a few more. As a content creator, I'm fortunate enough to have a platform and an audience to do that. Now, for whatever reason, this seems to make quite a lot of seemingly fragile people quite upset with me.
When did you become such a pussy? Did you serve? If not, sit the fuck down.
I support this 100% don't come to our country and burn the same flag you claim to care for at the same time, because you don't get the treatment you think you deserve.
You're a brain-dead retard and probably just lost half your following with this one single post. Go fuck yourself, pussy. Liberal sissy.
Shut up and get off my lawn, hippie.
Lol, shut the fuck up. George Washington would have dueled you to the death over burning the flag and it shouldn't be protected. Cry harder, moron.
I hate it when content creators get political. They believe they are better than everyone else. Honestly, wouldn't doubt. You use Roblox. Veritas has a pedophile to the name.
You should just stick to streaming. This most definitely isn't your lane. Cry harder, bitch.
Stick to video games, stay out of politics.
Shut the fuck up. People get jailed for burning rainbow and trans flags. Literal dumb fuck.
This who post just shows how uneducated you are. Then you go and spit more bullshit in the comments. Do some research before you go and make yourself look stupid on X.
Hey retard, if you want to be a and burn one you can. But when you do it in a public setting, you can't jest as much as you can't burn paper or tires in a public setting. It's an arson crime to cause fires in public.
Now, to these types of people, I have to defer to Christopher Hitchens on this, as he said it better than I ever could. And ironically, he did so while defending precisely the same freedom that these supposedly big government-hating people are apparently so happy to let the government take away from them.
Don't take refuge in the false security of consensus. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
Now, in fairness to the first guy, I do want to include their later responses because you don't come across W's like this on Twitter very often.
After sleeping on your comments and others, I'm willing to say respectfully that you are right. Everyone should have the right to express their opinion, even if I may not agree with it. I appreciate your candid response, and because of you, my thoughts on this have changed.
Now, I get the sense that the vast majority of the normal, well-adjusted people out there either feel like they have nothing to contribute to the conversation or don't feel like getting involved even if they did. And I think that's generally reflected in the typical ratio of views to likes to comments. This ratio is exactly where the term getting ratioed stems from, with the general concept being that if you get more comments than likes, you've pretty obviously said something that most of your audience disagrees with. Something that, outside of coordinated brigading attacks or mass reporting campaigns, is more often than not an indication that you've said something pretty stupid. Speaking of mass reporting campaigns, back in March I wrote about Elon Musk, criticizing the vandalism of Teslas that was going on, while at the same time making it clear that I had no sympathy for him personally, and what he was doing with Doge was actually quite bad for the country. Shortly after posting this, I returned to Twitter to see that the blue checkmark I begrudgingly pay for has been removed, and my account was put under review. You can't make this shit up. Some speculated that this was some kind of automated algorithmic moderation in place that was punishing people for being critical of Elon. But I think it's far more likely that I just got mass reported by some Elon fanboys and I got thrown in jail temporarily until someone at Twitter could verify the reports were unfounded. It's pretty incredible that the bootlickers who, just like Elon, that we might find disrespectful or distasteful,
chosen tribe.
I can't explain how freeing it is to detach yourselves of defending ourselves against what was once an. They could be bot accounts created by anti-MAGA forces who either want people to think whatever threat they pose is bigger than it really is, or to otherwise make them look bad. It could be that these accounts are real people who really believe what they're saying and simply have decided to spend what would be some significant portion of their life posting and amplifying some of the most hateful and divisive pro-MAGA content, while simultaneously engaging in what appears to be some kind of coordinated follow-for-follow campaign of an enormous scale. Now, finally, it could also be the case that these accounts are real people somewhere in the world, whether that's New Jersey or Nigeria, I don't know, who are being paid by someone, whether it's Putin or Donald Trump or the deep state, I couldn't say, to spread this stuff for some reason. And then they all just got found out when this new Twitter feature went live, and some of them quickly scrambled to get their VPN set up or whatever to make them seem legit. Now, regardless of the explanation, there's one thing that we can say for sure. Something unnatural is going on here. What we're seeing here is in some way a lie. I can't say who's doing the lying. I don't know which part of the picture is fake, but it simply cannot be the case that what we're seeing here is an accurate or realistic representation of reality. Maybe the hardcore MAGA ideals that feel like they're anywhere and everywhere on Twitter actually only represent a much smaller piece of the right than we think. If you viewed the political opinions on Twitter as some kind of representative sample of the larger US population, you'd think that like 49% of the country is this flavor of hardcore ride or die MAGA, which paints a picture about the right that I used to know, the more prototypical traditional conservative Republicans that I grew up with in the 90s and the 2000s, as being totally dead, gone, a thing of the past. Now, it's also possible that there's effectively zero representation of any remotely moderate Republicans out there because they've all been converted to full-blown MAGA. Or it's entirely possible that they just don't spend their time on Twitter. Either way, all the moderate Republicans that I used to know, they're nowhere to be found. I would love to talk to you, but there's no way for me to know where or who you are or what you think about what's going on in the world. The world where MAGA has truly taken over the hearts and minds of the entirety of the Republicans of America is indistinguishable from the world where MAGA is actually just two fucking kids in a trench coat.
The polls showed that the Republicans, they are still very much the party of Trump. Because when Republicans were asked who they would vote for in the primaries if they were held today and Trump was allowed to run for a third term, the president just took the cake. 50% of Republicans said that they'd back Trump again for a third term, more than double the 19.
I don't think the argument we're having anymore is the argument we were having when it was Barack Obama and Paul Ryan, which is more an argument about healthcare and taxes. And, I remember how many years I spent debating the Grover Norquist anti-tax pledge. It seems very quaint. Now we seem to be having an argument about a more base layer of civilization, right? So how do you think the argument, at least on the right, has changed? The sense of threat has changed?
Well, I mean, I do think that there is a very open debate now inside the right that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. And historically, conservatism was kind of rooted in the G.K. Chesterton fence principle, right? The idea that the difference between a conservative and a non-conservative is that a non-conservative walks across a field, sees a fence, doesn't know why the fence is there, immediately uproots the fence. The conservative sees the fence and says, I don't know why that fence is there. I'm going to go figure out why the fence was put there in the first place before I uproot the fence. In other words, before you tear down an institution, before you rip away something that has a historic basis, try to figure out why it's there, because it might be there for a pretty good reason. And I think that on the right, there's such a rage that has arisen, at least on part of the right, that the tendency is to just rip things out by their roots rather than trying to correct or even determining whether the thing can be corrected.
The right isn't conservative anymore. It's counter-revolutionary.
It's anti-left.
What's the difference between being a conservative and a counter-revolutionary?
Well, I mean, I think that being a conservative is rooted in basic principles, private property, rule of law, traditional virtue, localism, subsidiarity, balance of power among the branches of the government, right? These were all the things that I grew up with as a conservative. And I think that, obviously President Trump is post-ideological, that is for sure. And what that means is that the right has become sort of a repository for anti-left feeling and is now a big tent. And the problem with the big tent is you let in a lot of clowns.
Now, I know that there will inevitably be a subset of my audience that'll dismiss anything and everything I say, or probably already has, the moment that I started talking about Trump and MAGA. I'll be diagnosed with Trump derangement syndrome and rejected as a lib-cuck sheep brainwashed by the leftist media. And I get it. Trust me, I really didn't want to do a video about politics. I really didn't want to talk about something that has a very real chance of alienating a large part of my audience. I wanted to do a video about social media and its effects on humanity and empathy and reason, but let's be real here. There's no way that any serious person can make a video touching on the post-truth era of modern society and the effects of social media on humanity in 2025 without being political. And you can't talk about politics without talking about Trump. There's no way around it. These ideas are inseparable, and I think most reasonable folks would agree with me there, and where we would disagree would be in the details. So now, my dear listener, let me put forth the idea that we might not be all that different, you and I. I have a bit of an interesting history, and perhaps you'll indulge me for a moment as I share. My introduction into politics was during my late high school and early college years. As unfortunate as it may be for this video, I didn't have a smartphone back in 2007. Well, I guess technically I did, but I wouldn't exactly put my Palm Trio in quite the same category as, say, a modern iPhone. So I don't have like 8,000 photos or videos of everything that I'll be talking about to give you the most convincing narrative. but I will share a bit of what I do have, with some obvious redactions, of course. Now first, in order to be fully transparent, I need to show you this. You get it? It's like an Epstein Files joke? Or is it too soon? No, okay. The year was 2007, my senior year of high school, which you could say was an eventful year. Just 1 year earlier, a business teacher mentor of mine recommended me for a marketing internship at a local real estate company. I got my real estate license and sold my first house before I graduated high school. Now, I even still have my original real estate license. This was the year that I dove headfirst into business, economics, and the world of conservative politics. During my time in the real estate world, I was surrounded by some really great people, folks who also happened to be pretty hardcore conservative. These were people that I looked up to, considered mentors, and many of which I'm still friends with to this day. I cut my teeth on politics and real estate in the late 2000s. You know, the Bush era and the real estate crash.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
One of my conservative friends got me into guns. Here's me doing cool gun things. And here's my original concealed carry permit. Here's me on a little shooting excursion with my college roommate Nick. Some savvy folks out there might recognize the shirt I'm wearing. Some first run merch from the YouTube channel, The Nut and Fancy Project. One of the first channels I really got into, where I binged hundreds of knife and gun review videos. You don't buy merch from somebody that you aren't a huge fan of, and this isn't exactly a liberal YouTube channel. I even joined my conservative mentors in becoming a fully fledged member of the Freemasons. Now, in full disclosure, part of my reasoning for this was that I was, at the time, interested in a number of different conspiracy theories, and the Masonic Lodge I would ultimately become a member of was connected to a few different small businesses. The one directly adjacent to it was, I think, a company that sold lighting, and it was named something like Illuminatus. And then right next to that was a shop that sold eyeglasses, and their logo? Now, if you know anything about conspiracy theories, you'll know that seeing a Freemason lodge adjacent to a business called Illuminatus and another with a fucking all-seeing eye is like the most national treasure shit you could ever stumble upon. And at the time, I guess I was role-playing as Nicolas Cage. I eventually made my way through the ranks, and before I started my freshman year of college, I was raised to third-degree Master Mason, the highest degree in standard Freemasonry. Now, I learned quite a lot from this process. Most notably, how much effort is one man willing to go through to be a member of what is ultimately a boys' club where they meet once a month to play cribbage, smoke cigars, and eat pie, and then a couple of times a year they do some charity fishing events. Now, while it was a fascinating experience with a group of quite generous and respectable guys, it wasn't exactly the world domination I was hoping for, but you can't win them all. Now, during my college years, as I worked to get my business degree, I got a job at State Farm Insurance, ultimately getting my property and casualty insurance license. Now, from selling insurance and real estate and a number of other part-time jobs I had here and there, I'd saved up enough money to buy some of the toys that I had wanted for quite some time. Let's be real, no Democrat drives a truck like this. I was well on my way to living the American dream, and I hadn't even hit 20 yet. On the radio, I listened to Rush Limbaugh and Michael Savage religiously. I worked behind the scenes on some of the campaigns for the Republicans running for local government, designing and printing flyers and pressing buttons, and if you can believe it, I was also the co-founder and vice president of my university's chapter of College Republicans. This is me in front of the White House in 2008. Here's me just moments later being a douchebag edgelord to an old lady protesting outside the White House. It's looking back on memories like this that I thank Christ I didn't have a YouTube channel and a smartphone back then. The cringe is already too much to handle. These photos were from a trip that me and my fellow college Republicans took to DC, attending that year's Conservative Political Action Conference. I was in the third row when George W. Bush gave his famous speech there. A few hours later, after God knows how many rum and cokes, here's me, youthfully exercising my freedom of expression and potentially committing a crime. I honestly don't remember. See, guys, I'm just like you. Where are those emails at, am I right? Something about Benghazi or whatever, you get it.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
The point is, we aren't so different, you and I. This was a time of my life that I wouldn't trade for anything. I met so many great people and learned a lot about the world and a lot about myself. Over the years, I've grown and learned and changed, as one does. I realized that being a conservative Republican was actually a little bit more than I just want to make lots of money and don't want big government Democrats to take it from me to give to lazy people suckling off the government teat. As it turns out, there were lots of things that my conservative mentors had been saying for years that I had sort of just ignored for a long time. Every so often, I found myself experiencing some cognitive dissonance with so many aspects of their worldview that didn't exactly feel in line with my personal, social, and moral principles. Now, personally, I've never been religious, so I've always felt quite uncomfortable with much of what I feel like is the baggage that it brings to political ideologies. From a very young age, it was transparently obvious to me that while being gay is not exactly my personal cup of tea, neither is eating sushi, and who am I to scoff at someone who does enjoy either one? What's it got to do with me? And therefore, why the fuck should I care?
Do you know what marriage is?
Yes.
What is it?
It's when a husband and a wife get married.
So what do you think gay marriage is?
When a boy and a boy get married and a girl get married.
Oh, you're right. Do you think that's very hard to understand?
For some kids.
But not for you?
No, not really.
It always felt so bizarre to me how hyper-fixated conservative religious folks were about sex. Like, far more than those who they incessantly prattled on about as being hypersexualized. I have a number of gay friends and family members, all of whom, without exception, are amongst the best human beings I've had the pleasure of knowing. Of course, correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation, but I could never quite square that fact with the idea that they were somehow actually, like, evil or something. It was never the gays that gave me the kinds of sinister vibes that I got from pretty much all of religion. And what became clear pretty fast was that their understandings of sex and love and relationships seemed way more natural and healthy than anything I ever heard from anyone in Sunday school or speaking behind some pulpit. And eventually I'd come to recognize homosexuality for what it really is. Not merely a form of sex, but more importantly, a form of love. And as Hitch once said, it deserves our respect for that reason. On one hand, I was told that the Democrat communists were successfully ruining the economy, government regulations and unions were hurting the free market systems, and they'd been ballooning government entitlements for decades, solely to get votes from lazy immigrants living off of welfare at the expense of hardworking folks like us. And yet, the only people I personally knew who were struggling the most during the 2008 financial crisis were some of my hardworking, red-blooded, blue-collar Republican friends. Government subsidies and unions were largely the reason they still had their jobs and were making remotely decent wages. And those that weren't as lucky were only kept afloat because of welfare programs. It was around this time that I began to wonder if I really did see the world the same as them. If I really did feel as strongly about the things that they did. If all the things that they had been telling me actually matched reality. Or if maybe I had kind of just been half-heartedly role-playing for years because I just wanted to fit in with people I liked and respected, and some of my more immature, naive, short-sighted, and materialistic proclivities just so happened to align with one particular idea of economics that seemed to agree with most of what they were saying. I wanted to share all of this with you to try to make it clear that this video is not about bashing or shaming Republicans. It's not about praising or endorsing Democrats. This isn't the same old played-out partisan bullshit. But what it's also not is the kind of apathetic, complacent, and cynical kind of centrism that allowed us to get to where we are today. A place that very few of us across the political spectrum like the look of. If you really do care about truth and reason and are capable of feeling empathy, then we are on the same team. What I'm genuinely trying to convey to all my Republican friends out there is what someone like me sees when they look around. I want you to understand that I'm desperately looking for people like you. I want nothing more than to talk about these things, to see where we disagree and discover where we have common ground. I would love to talk shit about the obvious shortcomings of the Democrats, and talk about how based some of the Republicans have been on a lot of different issues, but it genuinely feels impossible for a handful of different reasons. Now, it just so happens that politics rarely comes up in conversation with my family and friends, and if it does, we very likely have the same views and perspectives on things. So the only exposure I get to anybody on the right side of the political spectrum these days is online. And as we both know by now, that probably isn't a very accurate or fair picture of reality. The people I see online probably aren't representative of the average. Or are they? I actually don't know. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? The optimistic part of me holds out hope that this isn't the case, but when I go back and check the Facebook accounts of some of my old friends from back in the day, they're all kind of just saying the same shit I see on Twitter from folks who I assume to be bots or crazy. So I'll admit it's not exactly encouraging. Either way, whenever we're engaging with somebody on the other side of the political divide, even if they aren't the unreasonable extreme, because of how divisive things have become, we're all so guarded. We've all become so defensive. We're all just used to dealing with unreasonable, disingenuous, and intellectually dishonest trolls online. So what happens is that we force each other, which ultimately forces ourselves, to be unreasonable about basically everything. The moment we let our guard down is the moment when we know the other side will pounce and say, "Aha, gotcha." So we're all stuck being unwilling to agree when any kind of valid criticism about our quote-unquote side gets made. And then we all just end up looking like hardline partisan schmucks. When someone quotes a statistic in support of their argument, it's easy to just dismiss it outright and say that's bullshit, even though 9 out of 10 times we don't actually know what the stats are or if they're accurately representing them or not. So like, what can we do? We can't accept it because then we're ultimately admitting defeat, even though the correct response in such a situation really should be to say, huh, that's interesting, I didn't know that, I'll have to look into it. And so many of the folks that are confidently tossing out these talking points and statistics, thinking they're the truly informed ones who've put in the time and effort to educate themselves, are all too often just regurgitating memes and lies like flat earthers do. So the irony is that the most reasonable person in that kind of argument is actually the person who just admits they don't know much about it. Of course, people will scoff at that idea, but think about how much time a typical working adult with kids has on any given day, and think about how there's hundreds of different contentious political topics flying around these days with centuries of historical nuance attached to them and 1,000 sources making 1,000 claims about each. It's really the case that we all kind of just need a fucking reality check. We all need to stop role-playing like we're experts. We all need to stop being so confident in the positions that we've come to on so many of the complicated things that we're willing to destroy relationships over. It's almost definitely the case that it's just not worth it. But we can't do the intellectually honest and reasonable thing because the moment we admit that we don't know, that's the perfect opportunity for them to say, oh wow, you don't actually know anything about this, and yet you believe what you do even though you're ignorant? And who wants to hear that from anybody? We have a serious challenge in front of us, one that starts with us needing to acknowledge that while we may have access to effectively infinite information about what's going on in the world around us, and almost all of it reinforces what we already believe to be true, each of us only has the time and the mental and emotional capacity to digest a tiny fraction of it, an amount of data that can be filled up in 5 minutes of doom scrolling on any of the platforms that we're all effectively living inside, because they're doing everything they can to force feed each of us a very specific perspective of the world, one that we should know by now is not an accurate representation of reality. It's easy to dismiss many of the things that I'm going to be talking about today as like alarmist or an overreaction, to think that I've got TDS or I'm just being overly emotional, to think that none of these problems were all that new for humanity, and this is all just politics as usual with a new coat of paint. And while I would agree that none of this is totally novel or unprecedented, at least from the lens of like human history, but there is something that makes our current state of affairs quite a whole lot more troubling. Historically, the spread of misinformation was always, in some way, constrained. The grifters used to have, like, horses dragging around fucking carriages from town to town, selling snake oil to what, like, a dozen people at a time? The conspiracy theorists really only had the ears of random passersby on street corners. But now, with the ubiquity of the internet and social media, for really the first time in human history, this problem has, quite literally, transcended the shackles of time and space. Now, ideas are able to be shared from anywhere, by anyone, with everyone else, everywhere else, having access to that data effectively forever. With his fist, a man can only do so much damage. Now give him a rifle, and that allows him to do considerably more. The internet has given each and every one of us the intellectual equivalent of the nuclear launch codes. And we are, right now, currently living in what feels like some kind of post-truth, post-apocalypse, with each and every one of us surrounded by radioactive lies and misinformation. A new kind of informational fallout, silent and invisible, with a half-life longer than the lifespan of any one of us. We aren't actually engaging for the purposes of gaining some kind of mutual understanding. Questions are actually inquiries. They're gotchas. Whenever they are talking, we're all just waiting for them to shut the fuck up so we can crack back with whatever pre-canned response we've got queued up. We didn't stop listening, we just never were in the first place. The internet didn't just encourage this shift, it optimized for it. We unknowingly created an environment where survival depends much more on the illusion of being correct than anything else. And this radioactive behavior we've learned has been slowly seeping out into the real world for some time now. Talking points turned into scoring points. Conversation became competition. Politics turned into a war. And when a war is being fought over truth itself, the outcome of the dialectic becomes existential. It's no longer about understanding. It's about legitimacy, identity, and survival. The internet set the stage and supplied the raw fissile material. Politicians assembled the that we